You're listening to Investigation Insiders by Integras Intelligence.
Welcome, everyone, to our third episode. I can't believe it's been three already. This is a lot harder than it looks in some ways, and I guess in some ways it's a little bit better than what I thought it was going to be. Thank you all for tuning in and your feedback so far. It's been very, very helpful. As we kind of been talking about, we are by no means the experts in putting together podcasts, so your feedback is really vital, and hopefully we're able to continue improving on what we're doing and keep your interest. Speaking of which, I think we are going to get a lot of interest in today's episode. We're joined by a very, very special person who I want to properly introduce. We've been fortunate throughout our careers because there have been some incredible people like the man that's joining us today that have taken interest in our success and well-being. This is a man who's been there for us from day -1, before we were even thinking about going into business, before we ever became entrepreneurs. He's been there for us from the beginning and even before that. He provided us support, gave us encouragement, provided guidance and where we needed it, and just been a great friend. And this is the most incredible thing. He did it all without asking for a single thing. So we're joined today by Bill Gavin. We'd need much more time than we have on this podcast to go through his life and career. But I want to give you some high-level highlights about who he is. He was with the FBI for 28 years, where he retired as the assistant director of the New York office. We met sometime after he left the FBI when we were both with Guardsmark, a national security firm. After Guardsmark, Bill had his own firm, the Gavin Group, for many, many years. And he's been one of our senior advisors since we started. He gave us instant credibility. Simply put, we would not be where we are today without him. So thank you and welcome, Bill.
Howard, thanks so much for those kind comments. I'm sure that in some phases you'd be better off without me, but that is what it is. I thought today maybe if you'd like to, we'd talk about a couple of things in the Bureau that I was fortunate enough to work with some of the finest people in the FBI and in law enforcement in general in some of the cases. One of them, which was the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993, the very first one that ever occurred. It's the first time that the terrorists put their big boots on this country, and it was a shock to all of us. The first bombing occurred on February 26, 1993, 12:16 p.m. I'll never forget it. I was in my office at 26 Federal Plaza when the bomb went off. Everybody initially thought it was a transformer, some electrical problem within the building, but that very soon proved to be false. The bomb that went off caused $200 million worth of damage. It killed 6 people. It injured 1,000 people, and it awoke in all of law enforcement and the prosecutors a knowledge that we were vulnerable. The individuals, there were 7 individuals who committed this atrocious act of terrorism upon the United States. A country, of course, that let them in and let them roam around freely within this wonderful republic of ours. And then they turn around and do something like this. And they were from all over the part of the Arab world. Mohammed Salameh was from Jordan. Mahmoud Abu Halima was from Egypt. Nidal Ayad was from Kuwait. Amma Ajaj was from Palestine. Ramzi Youssef was from Iraq. Iyad Ismail was from Jordan. And Abdul Rahman Yassin was from Iraq. And so you can see that whole area, the whole terrorist area, is represented in this one bombing in 1993. The when the bomb went off, of course, everybody shot into action. And I think the most important thing about this bombing is to realize that, for us to realize in law enforcement, that while it's primarily the FBI's jurisdiction in this particular case, there is no way the FBI tried to, nor should have tried to, go out and resolve this on our own. It was a commitment. This investigation was a commitment to the people of the United States that we are all in this together. And if we don't solve it, shame on all of us. And so the day of the bombing, we opened up the command center at 26 Federal Plaza in the FBI office there. And we had representatives from over 26 different agencies, to include prosecutors and law enforcement agencies, and gave everybody a say. My commitment to everybody at that point was that nobody would be left in the shallows. Nobody would be left in the corner. There would be no sidebar conversations where people were cut out of information. And I made that.
On that note, can you? So, what was your role with the FBI at the time?
At the time, I was a deputy assistant director of the FBI. Jim Fox was the assistant director there, and he asked me, kind of told me, "This is yours. It's yours to resolve this whole situation." And the way I looked at this whole thing was that, as the head of the FBI part of the investigation, I told people, I'm the band leader. I'm the leader of this orchestra. I don't play timpani. I don't play reed. I don't play horn. I don't play strings. I don't do any of this. I don't have the talent for that. But my job is to synthesize all the abilities of everybody in the room to do what they do best. And I told them I wouldn't let them down. I wouldn't try to upstage them. It wouldn't be FBI this, FBI that. It would be we as a task force working it. And quite frankly, it worked out just well. We got information from people, from law enforcement agencies that we very seldom got information from. They just sat down. They had a spot in the room. I provided them with TVs, with computers, with telephones, and everybody went to work. And at 10 o'clock every morning and at 4 o'clock every afternoon, we had an update for everybody in the room, and nobody was excluded. That's how it worked.
Interesting. So do you remember where you were at the time of the actual bombing?
I was in my office at 26 Federal Plaza.
And how'd you hear about it? Like, did you hear it? Did you? What was that moment like?
It was kind of a surreal thing. You thought you heard maybe a thunderclap, and 26 Federal Plaza is not that far away from the Trade Center, and we thought I heard a thunderclap. I immediately got a phone call from some of the squads saying they think there was an explosion and they think it was electrical in nature. And so we dispatched people right to the scene immediately. You know, the workers, the people who do the work, not the people who claim the glory. And they went down and actually were able to report back the tragedy of what had happened. By that time, of course, all of law enforcement, the NYPD, the fire department, the first responders, everybody was involved in taking care of the immediate needs before the actual investigation started. It was a real calamity. Basically, the investigation unfolded with both talent from all the participants and, like any good investigation, a smidgen of good luck runs in here too. What happened was they put the bomb, a 5,000-pound AMPHO, ammonia nitrate bomb, with enhanced by hydrogen tanks and other explosive stuff, in a rider rental van. Drove the van into 1B, the basement of the World Trade Center, the North Tower, and detonated it. They reported the van stolen prior to the explosion, thinking that if they reported it stolen, you know, it wouldn't point to them. It would be they were honest about it. Well, they reported it stolen. After the bomb went off, they contacted the individual, Mohammed Salameh, Jordan contacted the rental agency in Jersey City, saying that, do I get any money back because the van was stolen and I reported it? And of course, by that time, we had determined through looking at CVI confidential VINs on the truck that the truck was first sold. It had been a Ryder truck in Texas and brought up to Jersey City. We were able to trace it to the rental agency in Jersey City. So we knew that the pieces of the truck was with a bomb of that magnitude. Now there wasn't much left of the truck, but we were lucky enough to identify it. So by the time he called back to say that did he get any money back, we already knew that the truck, where the truck was and who it was and what was involved. We told him, sure, come on in and get your money back. He came in to get $400, and there was the start of the arrests. Salome was arrested. Hajjaj was already in jail at the time, but all of these people started fitting into place. We were able to determine where they prepared the bomb, where they stored all the components for the bomb, who was involved, and the primary people that got out of town immediately were Mahmoud Abu Halima, who was a driver, a limo driver in the city. He went immediately to Egypt. Ramzi Youssef, who was the ringleader of this whole thing, left the same day. He went back in through Pakistan and on into Afghanistan and to regions where we couldn't reach him. Abdul Rahman Yassin is the only individual who's never caught in this whole adventure. He departed from New York 2 days after the bombing and went to Baghdad, and we never heard from him again. It's a little weird. In doing all these things, the investigation is complex. The investigation was tedious. It was time consuming. People that are involved in the city, I'll never forget Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch gave us the basement of their building in which we could keep the evidence that we were constantly taking out of the Trade Center to examine. I mean, people were just rolled over and did the right thing. It was, you can talk about New York being heartless and cruel and all. It isn't. They're mushy. They are terrific folks, and they'll do whatever they can. Just don't portray them as being mushy. That's all they ask.
Especially if you're from Massachusetts.
That's right. Don't say Yankees and don't say Red Sox. That's the only thing they ask.
You got it. Well, that's all. Like again, all of this is just fascinating. As we were talking about beforehand, one of the things about this particular podcast is the name, Investigation Insiders. And one of the things that we were hoping to do with you today was, obviously there's a ton of information out there about the incident, about what happened, about the investigation, about the people that were involved. What we were hoping today was that you could maybe talk a little bit about some of the things that a lot of people don't know about that happened during the course of the investigation, during the course of the arrest, and your involvement and some of your thoughts on that, if you wouldn't mind talking about that.
I'd love to. The investigation is what it is, and as you say, there's a lot that is known about it and a lot that's not. The nitty-gritty of how things are done, or maybe some incidents that occurred. There's a couple of things that come to mind that really aren't out there on the focus of everybody. And one was the arrest of Mahmoud Abu Halima in Egypt. When we found out who he was and where he went, we got in touch with Hosni Mubarak, who was the leader of Egypt at the time, and he assured us that he would find Mahmoud and turn him over to us, but he was at the Hajj at that particular point. When he came back in country, he would be arrested and we would be notified. Well, he did notify us. He called us, and the logistics of going over there and one of our fellow agencies, an intelligence agency, provided a plane and flew the head of my SWAT team, myself, a first office agent, and a detective from NYPD, which caused a little concern with the FBI headquarters itself. But I said, two people know more about Mahmoud al-Halima than anybody else. It's the first office agent and the detective from the PD, and they're going. So I brought them on this plane, and we went from Islip, Long Island, over to Northern Europe, and then from there to Cairo. We landed at Cairo. We never got off the plane. Well, we got off the plane just to stretch. At the base of the stairs, they put our plane, which was a G4, Gulfstream 4, in between some Iraqi jets, which was a little uncomfortable, but they put us over there, and within 15 minutes, this gray limousine, Mercedes, kept going around at about 80, 90 miles an hour, coming by the row of planes and going away again and coming back. We decided maybe it'd be a good time to get back into our plane. So we went back into the plane. The car eventually stopped at the base of the stairs. One of the Egyptian, well, they almost look like thugs, came up the stairs, looked around inside the plane, went back down, got in the car, and brought Mahmoud al-Halima into the plane. Unrecognizable. His head was all bandaged like you'd see a mummy in some of the sarcophagi. He only had a slit for a mouth and two holes for a nose. No eyes, no ears. He had plastic cuffs on that had already gone through the skin to the bone. It was a horror show. But he came in. We were able to cut the dressing off his head, the bandages off his head, and release his hands from the cuffs. As you can well imagine, hadn't been bathed, no human dignity had been extended to him. What we found out on the trip back was that they had stripped him down, put him on a spit, rotated him on that spit, and burnt every inch of his body with cigarettes and lighters. It was horrifying.
Can you expand on that just a little bit? What do you think the motivation? Why did they do that? What was their motivation for doing that?
Their motivation is he is an Egyptian citizen. We are taking a chance at this rendition, if that's what we want to call this. We're taking a chance at it, but we want to know what he knows, and we're going to make him tell us what their form of interrogation is a tad different than ours, I might say. And so they tried to get him to tell them everything. Whether he did or he didn't, we don't know. We don't know to this day.
That was going to be my follow-up question is, do you know what they got out of him? But I guess we don't know the answer to that.
We don't know the answer to that, and they are not exactly forthcoming on what they got or how they got it. When we got him back, flew him back into the United States, interviewed all the way back across the pond by the detective and the first office agent, and when we got to the States, usually you bring them into the office, photograph them, fingerprint them. I said, this is beyond the necessary thing to be done. Get him to the hospital, get the cameras and the photograph the people up there. And we knew downright well, anything we got in the plane was ours. The minute we hit the ground, he's going to get lawyered up, and we're not going to get anything else out of him. But that's the risk you take and the humanitarian thing that you had to do. And that's all it was to it. So that's how Mahmoud came back into the United States. So he was about 6'2", red-headed, freckle-faced Egyptian, so he wasn't too hard to identify.
I was going to ask about the mood on the plane ride there and the mood on the plane ride back. Were you and the others that were there with you, was it just a surreal experience? Were you too seasoned to really have an energy rush from it? Can you talk a little bit about the mood going there and coming back? Was it any different? Did it feel the same? And then what was it like when you got him in possession and knew that you got the guy?
That's an excellent question, Fahad. There's a couple of things that happen in these cases. When you look at this from the outside looking in, like you're watching a movie,
Right.
you get the rush and the thrill. When you're in the middle of it, that doesn't exist.
Mm.
It's not nervousness. It's nothing. I got a job to do here. You try to get some sleep on the way over if you could, because it's a good haul. And we did get a couple of hours sleep. There's no sleep on the way back. That's
Sure.
impossible. But it's while you're in the plane, while you're with that person, you're right. The idea he is in custody. That's one more down and two more to go. It's a great relief to have another one in custody. But it's like a normal. Normal is not a good word. It's not something you say, wow, this is great. Look at all the adventure. It's not. That doesn't go on. You're just there to do a job. And
Right.
while it sounds a little unmelodramatic, it is. I mean,
Sure.
that's the way it is. And you move on that way. My job or what motivated me to do that myself rather than to dedicate somebody else to do it was when somebody gets taken a hostage, they want the main person. And that main person is also the person who could prevent hostages from being taken. So I think that was my job, to protect the people that were actually doing the job. I
Sure.
didn't do the job myself. The agent and the detective did the job. But
Sure.
my job is to protect them, and that's the reason I went. For no other reason. And sometimes that's hard to convince people, but that is what it is. That doesn't bother me much.
Sure. Sure. Well, that's interesting. I mean, that's a great story, and how, I guess, how talkative was he on the plane?
He Not a lot. He would have confessed to the crucifixion if that's what you asked him to do, I think, and that's why we were a little
Sure.
hesitant to push it too far, because it'd be thrown out anyway. But we did get some good information from him as to his involvement at the time. He was more than willing to tell us that, just to get back to the United States and out of that plane and
Nice.
into a hospital someplace. So that was helpful. Um, the other thing that I wanted to talk about just a little is the second trip abroad, and that was to Islamabad. Um, that was a little different. The theatrics of that one were just amazing. When we found out Ramzi Youssef, after he left the United States on the 26th of February '93, he didn't stay still someplace. He was an awful kid. He was only like 29 years old. As I said, he's from Iraq, but he was educated in the UK,
Mm.
and he spoke English very well. He he was the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed,
Right.
which we later found out. And and so when he left, he did a number of different things. He after the bombing, he went to the Philippines. He
Okay.
plotted to kill the president of the United States on his visit to the Philippines. He plotted to kill the Pope when the Pope visited the Philippines. But he developed this program called Bojinka Plot, where he was going to bring down 10 to 12 U.S. airline carriers coming from the Orient, coming from Japan primarily, to the United States, all within a 24-hour period. And he developed a program to do just that. And that's a whole other story. But what I wanted to talk about basically was when he finally left the Philippines, because he blew the side out of the building that he was preparing the bombs in. He went back to Islamabad and was going to go back into Afghanistan again. And what we did is we did a lot of work there. But one of the things we did is we prepared matchbooks, because everybody smokes. Everybody
Mm.
smokes. So we prepared these matchbooks with not just the regular 20 matches, but the 40 in them, the big ones. And we put his
Yeah.
picture on it. We did it for him, and we did it for Abdul Rahman Yassin. and we offered a $2 million reward. And somehow those fell out of a plane all over the area just to get everybody's attention. And
Sure.
wouldn't you know, he was in Islamabad and got identified. When he got identified, he got arrested, and then we decided we had to go over and pick him up and bring him back. Again, theatrics. We had a 707, Air Force provided a 707, one of the big gray planes. And if you can recall, that was one of the basic carriers transport planes in the United States. The 707 and the DC-8 were the two big monsters that carried people in travel. But this was a big gray one that was painted white in like 36 hours and prepared to go overseas. We took the hostage rescue team members, 6 members of the hostage rescue team. Again, we took the same agent that interviewed Mahmoud Abu Halima. Again, was the kid who, a young guy, first out of his age, and he had about 3 years in, but he knew what he was doing and he understood all these people. And the second person we took to do the interview was a Secret Service agent of about equal tenure, who was just a super kid and an interviewer. So we took those 2 people as the main people to interview Ramzi Youssef on the way back to the United States when we picked him up. We had 3 flight crews on board the plane, and you can well imagine there's no seats in this plane. They're kind of like hammocks slung where you sit, lay down. Water, you'd have to have plenty of water on a trip like that because you get dehydrated. Food was stored right in the belly of the plane, but you just, as you walk down the aisle of the plane, you just open the trap door and walk down into the belly. This was not a sophisticated operation. We prepared an interview room out of tarps in the plane. In any event, we take off out of Dulles Airport. And with a plane this size, you can't totally fuel it because the wings are going to hit the ground. So it takes off, and then we take on 2 tankers full of fuel from McGuire Air Force Base. Now, I don't know how many people have ever been in a plane that's refueled in the air, but it's, you see it on television and it's exciting. It's wonderful.
I haven't.
I'll tell you what, when you're in it, it's not exciting. It's a horror. It's a horror show. Your plane is jumping all over the place. You are coming up underneath the belly of the tanker. Your plane is a pretty good sized plane.
Right.
The connector from the tanker to your plane is about 20 feet long. You got to come within 20 feet. You look up, and there's a kid up there that they just took out of a video store someplace, I think, who's trying to fly that boom into your plane to refuel you. Your plane is jumping all over the place. It's going up and down. The conversation between the cockpits of the 2 planes is anything but church talk, but it goes on. We took on two tankers full of fuel out of McGuire Air Force Base, and we went to Cairo. In Cairo, we refueled again, and then went to Islamabad. We never left the tarmac in Islamabad. When we got there, they brought Ramzi Youssef out to the airport. Of course, he's all in the orange jumpsuit and whatnot. We finally got Ramzi Youssef on the plane, and we had made the decision that going back to the United States, we could not stop anywhere, because the world is such that if you stop someplace who decides, well, this is the United States and they have the death penalty, they're going to kill these people, we don't have that, we're not going to let them go into their death, and all that kind of esoteric nonsense. And so we decided we were going to have to go nonstop. That 707 does not make it nonstop across the sea.
Oh no, this is a bunch of refuelings, it sounds like.
2 out of Diego Garcia, 2 out of Mendenhall, and 2 out of Rota, Spain. By the time that was through, I had decided that I'd had all the fun I could take of refueling in the air, but it, it,
Hopefully,
it
you
was
guys took
chaos.
your motion sickness medicine before you got on that flight.
No, I wasn't smart enough to think of that. But in any event, the good thing that happened during the flight is the two people, the Secret Service agent and the Secret Service agent, by the way, eventually became the head of Secret Service in New York, Brian Parr. Um, these two people interviewed Ramsey and got him to tell them a lot of information. As a matter of fact, he wrote something down. They looked at it and they got the information on, and then he said, "Oh, I shouldn't have written that down." And he picked the piece of paper up and chewed it up and swallowed it. Things
Oh
that you
man,
don't read about in the reports. Um,
wow.
but on the way back, they did what they had to do. Um, the problem that we had is occurred in Rota, Spain, when we took on the last tanker full of fuel. We were having a heck of a time hooking up. The weather was a little jumpy, and the
Mm,
plane, of course, was jumpy. And it took us almost a half an hour to take on that last tanker. We didn't want to let it go because we would have had to land in Iceland again, and we don't want to land any place but the United States. The other thing is, when we come back to the United States, because of our own rules and regulations and laws and governances, we had to land in the Southern District of New York. We
mm,
couldn't land at LaGuardia. We couldn't land at Kennedy because we would have had to have a hearing to bring them back into New York City, which was the Southern District. So we went up the road a bit and landed in New York. And they sent the when we landed, we it was night, and so they sent a helicopter out to pick us all up, and that was another flight because we sat in the helicopter. Ramzi Youssef was sitting beside me, and the two agents that had interviewed him all the way over were sitting across from me. And Ramsey, of course, had a hood over his head and the orange jumpsuit on. And
yeah.
as we came down the river, the Hudson, you can look down. It was February again, and
Yeah.
it was cold, but New York City was lit up like a jewel on a tree. It was just absolutely gorgeous.
Right.
And as we get to the Empire State Building, I pull the shroud off this Ramsey Youssef's head, and I say to him, "Look straight out the window, Ramsey. See that? It's the Trade Center, and it's still standing." And this fool says it wouldn't be if I had enough money and enough explosives.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
so the two agents immediately sat up straight. I said, "You might want to jot that down so he can hear that again sometime." And it was one of the main parts of the testimony as to his guiltiness in the trial. But
Wow.
those are the things that don't come out during the course of these investigative endeavors, and particularly in big cases. There's so many small things that occur that you overlook. And again, as you said, it's not like the thrill of, you're not nervous and all that. It's just part of life. It's what you do. You think about it later on, but it's
Sure.
not something that gets your juices flowing and makes you act maybe a little irrationally at times.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things that was great. And then the trial, of course, was just a thrill to have them convicted, and each
Yeah.
one of them sentenced by Kevin Duffy, who was a figure in himself who just passed away not too long ago. Um, he sentenced them each to 240 years in federal prison, and he did it all based on the life expectancy of the six people that would have
Right.
that
I
died.
remember that.
He
Yeah.
did it. He factored in a lot of different things, the laws, all the different counts and stuff. And it's 240 years, and they're all serving their terms at Supermax in Pueblo, Colorado, and they're 23 hours a day in a cell. And then when they let them out to exercise, they're in a yard with walls so high they can't see over the walls. They don't know where a mountain is. They don't know where a tree is. They can only see a sky. And that's the way their life is going to be until their life is over.
That's incredible. Something I want to just go back to on that part of I guess, your story is with regard to flying straight back without landing, right? I guess just to clarify what you're saying is like if you stopped in a certain place, they might have some rules where they say, you know what, we need to take this guy into custody or something, and that's what the concern was, right?
That is what the concern was. And it's not so much that they think it's the jurisdiction, it's that the United States has the capital penalties, do put people to death. And that is so opposed to some of the countries that we didn't want to take any kind of a chance of having that happen, where we went through all of this and then lost our prisoner I'm sure I don't make fun of them. It's just that it's not our way of doing business, and we ought to do everything we can to keep it according to our way to do business.
Sure, sure. And then just from a planning perspective, right? So obviously you all get a call saying that they have them. How much planning? Like, is it a ton of planning, or is it something that just, you were prepared, the Bureau and the other agencies were prepared and you just move into action? Or was there a lot of red tape and other things that you had to go through at the time? And how much from the time you knew that he was in possession to the time you were on the ground? What was that time frame? How long?
I want to say, I can't tell you exactly. I want to say it was in the vicinity of 3 days. We
Okay.
did a lot of pre-planning. That
Yeah.
always helps. Pre-planning is the key to success. To open all the communication skills, to get to the Air Force. If we could get him, what could you do for us? Those kinds of things.
Sure.
What is the State Department going to do for us? And the State Department was very helpful in this particular case. Sometimes they're not. They are very helpful in this case. What is the agency going to do for us? All of those things have to be coordinated and tied together ahead of time so that you don't go rumbling around, do something that you probably ought not to do. I don't mean in terms of legality, but in terms of pre-planning. So
Yeah.
we do all that stuff ahead of time, and then
Sure.
you just have to start pushing the buttons and update the information that you need. But all of the ability to go into Islamabad in a plane like that under those set of circumstances has to be prepared by state, by a lot of different entities in order to make it work. And
Yeah.
you really have to be cognizant of everybody's sensitivities and things like this.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, as I'm listening to you, I guess it's very much like a family, right? Where a tragedy, you mentioned the NYPD, you mentioned the Secret Service, the agency, all these different organizations. It's amazing how a tragedy manages to bring people together and show how resilient we really are as Americans.
It really does. I mean, a case such as this type will make all the bias against that occurs within organizations. It will make it disappear. Sometimes you get a little glitch, but the dynamics and the personalities and the character of the people who are responsible for both running and doing the real work of these agencies comes to light every single time. It's just it's a wonderful thing. It was really wonderful.
Sure. So I guess fast forward to September 11th, having experienced the first bombing. What were your thoughts when you first heard about the first plane crashing, or just if you could walk us through that a little bit, having played such a intricate role in the first investigation?
Interesting. When I know exactly where I was. I was in Newton at the Boston office of Guardsmark when it occurred on 9/11. We got the word, and I had a television in the office, and we got the word that some small plane had hit a tower or something. Turned on the news and was able to see live the second plane hitting the tower. And I said to myself, they're at it again. And I think it was disgusting to me and put a lump in my throat and a pain in my heart, because it was going to be so much worse than the first one. The first one, they intended to blow up one tower and drop it into the other, and of course they didn't know what they were doing. But behind that, Osama bin Laden, think of where he came from and what his family did. They were all construction people.
Sure.
When this first thing happened, they knew they had done it wrong, and they were going to plan the next time to do it right. And when I saw that plane hit, I said, they have been successful. Didn't know who it was at that time. It turned out to be correct, but it was just a horrible tragedy that you said, why could this not have been prevented? But it wasn't. And then when we go back and we start to look at the training and the where these people went to school to learn to fly, we taught them how to fly our planes into our buildings. It was just it was catastrophic. It was tragic.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And so I guess many years later, tell me how all of these, how's the first bombing, how September 11th, how does it impact you to this day? How do you feel about it when you think about it? Does it take you back to those times? Talk a little bit about that if you wouldn't mind.
Both, I think probably more the 93 bombing, because I was in the middle of it.
Sure.
You never get over it. You always remember the details. I mean, knowing the full names of all these people and where they're from and what they did, you don't get over those kinds of things. And I think that what we forget sometimes is, after this February 1993 bombing, within months they were planning to bomb the two tunnels, Holland Lincoln, the garage of the United Nations, and 26 Federal Plaza. And we had another case going at the same time, whereby we went into the bomb making factory in Queens, New York, and stopped that from happening. It was just so many things happening at the same time. So all those things stick inside you. You remember meetings with people who were boots on the ground, the agents and the police officers, and who were actually doing the work, sitting in your office at 1 o'clock in the morning,
sure,
giving you a brief. Those are the kinds of things that stick in your heart. And then on 9/11, of course, removed by that time. I retired in 95. But I think about that, and it breaks my heart, because I don't know if it could have been avoided. I guess everything can be avoided with all the right moves, but this was just a horrible tragedy for all those innocent souls who have lost their lives, and the impact it's had on all their families. You think about that frequently, and I've been to the site in Lower Manhattan on a number of occasions on the anniversaries, and it's not an easy thing to do, and you still get a lump in your throat over things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Having grown up in New York and been through both of those incidents, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it never really leaves you. I really, first of all, we could sit here literally all day. Anyone that knows Bill knows that he's had a full life and has a lot of very, very interesting stories that he can tell, and hopefully we'll have him back again in the future. But Bill, I want to thank you for a few things, if you wouldn't mind. First, I want to thank you for your service to our country. Second, I want to thank you for everything that you've done for Integras Intelligence. Third, everything that you've done for us personally. And lastly, thanks for joining us today. What you discussed with us today is really part of history. It needs to be heard, and we are so fortunate to have it told on our platform directly from you. So, Bill, I've been ending each podcast with some takeaways. Today is simple. The takeaway is that Bill Gavin is incredible. So thank you. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
I just want to say thank you to you, to Joe, to Tony, to everybody at Integras. You're doing the right thing at the right point in time, and you're taking time to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And that's so darned important in this day and age where people just slough things off and run through the daily routine without really thinking of the consequences. So it is my pleasure to do whatever I can do to show what Integris is and how they can best help anybody else. It's indeed my pleasure every single day. I thank God that I've been associated with the two of you, with all you guys at Integris Intelligence.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. I mean, it just doesn't stop. This is a man that's just on our side, and we are just so incredibly lucky. So thank you all again for joining us. Please subscribe and/or send comments to us. We want to hear from you. We want to find out how to, improve, and you can find out about how to reach out to us in the description section of the podcast. So thank you again. Thank you, Bill. Till next time.
My pleasure.
Don't forget to follow Integras Intelligence on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter.